my name is Marlena Massey. I am the MAC Program Director over at Waco Foundation, and I would like to welcome you to the Hispanic Leaders Luncheon. I have served on the Hispanic Leaders Network Advisory Committee and HLN's Professional Development and Mentoring Committee. It's an honor to be a part of the Hispanic Leaders Network. We truly have leaders in this group who are passionate about inspiring and supporting current and future leaders to make a difference in our community. Today's leadership development focuses on board governance, and y'all are in for a really nice treat. We will get started soon and introduce Felicia Goodman, our guest presenter, in just a few minutes, but first I would like to ask Ms. Ilda Savito to come up and give our invocation. If you guys would please bow your heads with me. Father, we thank you for the union and the amount of people that are here today, Father, for community. We thank you that you are with us. Wherever we go, we know we continue to pray for the victims and the families of Uvalde and now Tulsa, Father, and we just ask that you would continue to comfort them and help our nation stay unified during this hard time. We thank you for the food here today, and we thank you for what's to come. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Ilda. And it's due to our partners that the Hispanic Leaders Network is able to host events such as today's Leadership Development Board Governance Training. We are grateful to Waco Foundation for sponsoring today's luncheon. I would like to invite Natalie Polinsky, Waco Foundation Senior Director of Communications and Donor Services, and my boss and my mentor, she's incredible, up to say a few words.
Thanks. I'll be super quick. I just want to say thank you for allowing us to host today. It's so great to see everyone in this room to learn about strong board governance, which is very important. Waco Foundation is the community foundation for McLennan County, and our mission is to promote solutions to community challenges, strengthen nonprofits, engage philanthropists, and manage charitable assets, all to improve quality of life in McLennan County. We manage about $140 million in assets, and we give out about $5 million a year through our grant making, capacity building, and donor advised grants and scholarships. So it's very important to us that we have nonprofits in the community that have strong boards, because strong boards lead to strong organizations that can carry out their mission, and it helps Waco Foundation do our job well. So we're huge proponents of building better boards and all the work that Felicia's doing, and we just appreciate everyone being here to learn.
Thank you, Natalie. And now I'd like to invite Era Terrazas, Economic Development Director for Syntex Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, to come and introduce our presenter for the day.
Hello, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our Board of Governance trainer for today, Ms. Felicia Goodman. Felicia Goodman has a passion for developing the capacity of organizations to do more good in the world. She enjoys pulling from her 25 years of nonprofit experience to support nonprofits in her hometown of Waco through her work at the Goodman Foundation, whose mission is to make Waco a better place. She has served as the Executive Director of the Goodman Foundation since 2012. She has served on the governance committees of Philanthropy Southwest and Prosper Waco, and regularly provides trainings to local board members. Felicia is a native Wacoan and graduate of Waco High School, and earned a Bachelor's of Science in Organizational Development from Vanderbilt University and a Master of Public Health from Columbia University. She also earned a certificate in nonprofit management from Austin Community College and a certificate in nonprofit board consulting from Board Source. If we could give Ms. Felicia a hand and welcome.
Thanks for having me today. It is exciting and a little intimidating to have such a big crowd here today, but I'm really glad you're here to learn about board governance. This is a very high level training. I usually do this in 2 hours, and when I do it in 2 hours, I say this is a very high level training. Each topic that I touch on could be anywhere from an hour to a week full of training, depending on the topic. And so I think it's really important that kind of what I'm talking about today is everything you need to know more about with regard to board governance training. So I'm going to just start by just telling you a little bit about the Cooper Foundation. I could just echo everything Natalie said about the importance of why we think it's important for board members to be trained in board governance, because well-governed boards lead to strong nonprofit organizations. The Cooper Foundation exists to make Waco a better or more desirable place to live, and the main way we do that is to make grants to nonprofit organizations, and we want to feel really good about the boards of the organizations we make grants to. And so about 15 years ago, before I was in my position, the three foundations, the three staffed foundations in Waco got together after a pretty significant scandal in Waco with a board, with a nonprofit board where money was stolen, somebody went to jail. And what the staff of the foundations at the time really decided was, or kind of came to the conclusion was, maybe boards need to know a little bit more about their role as board members, and that could hopefully prevent what happened. This doesn't make scandals go away. It doesn't make bad people stop being bad people. It doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't prevent mistakes from happening, and that's often what the problems are. But we hope that as more people understand fully their role as board members, that organizations will be run better. So we make grants to nonprofits. We also host the Nonprofit Network, which is a month, or it's actually every other month in the nonprofit community, because it is available to you as nonprofits. If you are on a nonprofit board, make sure the board you are affiliated with knows this, but it's available for free. So it has a great dining room. A lot of organizations use our space as their board meeting space because they don't have a good space to host. And then 2 rooms, a large room and a smaller room, all kind of one space that people use for receptions or retreats or secret meetings. It's kind of, nobody has to know you were ever there, and we do have some secret meetings that happen there. So want to just extend the invitation to you and your nonprofit to use our house. So as I said, we do this training. About 15 years ago, Waco Foundation actually started bringing in a nationally known trainer, Chuck Loring, to do trainings for board members and staff of nonprofit organizations. And he was wonderful. He would come for like 2 days and 1 or 2 days, and he would give this really intensive training. And about 5 or 6 years ago, some executive directors came to us as the foundations and said, please keep bringing Chuck Loring. We like this intensive, longer training. However, many of our board members cannot commit a day or 2 to board governance training, but we still want them to get board governance training. So could you offer something that's a little shorter? And so I started doing these 2-hour, or sometimes 1 hour, 45-minute trainings for board members. And again, I encourage you to dig deeper on each of the topics. But that is how important the foundations felt nonprofit board governance is, and how much the staff is really asking for this too. The executive directors of nonprofits realize they need strong boards who understand their role in order to do their job. So just a quick show of hands of who currently is serving on a board, a nonprofit board. Okay, lots of wonderful people serving on boards, and lots of other wonderful people who have the opportunity to serve at some point. I really hope that you will, if you're not currently serving on a board, that you will consider serving at some point. Nonprofits have to have boards in order to function, and they need good, smart, caring people who are dedicated to the community to fill their boards. So I encourage you after today, don't be scared off by all the information I'm going to share with you, but really lean in and decide what is important to you and express interest in serving on a board at some point. So when board members don't really fully understand their role on a board, we believe it really increases risk for the organization, but as important, you have people who are coming to a table either once a month or maybe every other month to govern the organization, but if they don't fully understand their role, and if the staff don't understand, then they're an underutilized asset. They bring so much to the table, but if they don't really understand why they're there, none of that can be accessed. So fully utilizing your board members is so critical, and also will make their experience, or your experience on a board, even more enriching. So, my first disclaimer is that this is super high level. The next disclaimer is that these are leading practices. There's no like gold standard research that really says these are the things you must do in order to have a high performing organization. But the information I'm going to present today is based on many surveys of nonprofit organizations, and it is found that the most high performing organizations are employing most of these practices. So it's also not cookie cutter. Every organization is at a different place in their life cycle. They have different needs, they're different sizes. I mean, you name, every organization is unique. You name the way they could be different. So nothing I am saying is, we're not going to come, the foundations aren't going to come and saying, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? And if you're not doing all of the things I talked about, you don't pass the test. It's not like that at all. It's just, these are tools that we hope you will take away to employ within the nonprofit organization on which you're serving, and to make it a better organization at the right time, with the right people. So do what makes sense. So I'm just going to go over it. I'm going to talk really fast, and I am available for questions afterwards. But again, this is a 2-hour presentation condensed into about 45 minutes. So I'm going to talk so fast. And we can have questions at the end if there's time, and I apologize for that. So legal duties and why do we have boards, building a great board, and then some trends in board structure that we're seeing these days. So legal duties and why have boards. So nonprofits are 501c3 organizations. That is just a tax status with the IRS. You have to apply to become a nonprofit 501c and have that status, have 501c3 status, and you fill out paperwork and you have to have 3 board members. So that's not enough board members. Just if you're brand new, that's okay. That's what you have to have. But work on growing that as a nonprofit if you only have 3. But that's all the IRS requires you to have when you start off. But it must have a board of directors that governs the organization. Of course, with a nonprofit, there's no profit incentive. That doesn't mean you end the annual year, the fiscal year, with 0 money or negative money. You want more money. You want to be having a profit. It just means that no individuals benefit from that profit. All the profit goes back into the organization to do more good in the world. Leadership is shared between the board of directors and the executive director. So that has to be a really strong, good relationship. And then, as I said, you have to have 3 to 25 or more board members to have an organization. So I'm just going to put yourself in the position of an executive director real quick and think about having anywhere from 3 to 25 or more bosses. So that's a lot. It's a lot. To have more than one is a lot. So my first kind of message here is if and when you serve on a board, try to think about that from the standpoint of the executive director, and in communication to that person would be best through one person. That would be the chair. So that person doesn't have to hear from, 3 to 25 people on an ongoing basis. It doesn't mean you can't communicate individually with the executive director or CEO, but I think that's an important thing that people who serve on boards, especially if you're new, don't necessarily think about, that, oh, I'm not the only person who might be sending this poor person 1,000 emails about the topic that I happen to care about. So it's just something to kind of caution. The legal duties according to nonprofit corporation law are duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. I'm going to go over these 3 things, and I could just turn off the show and walk out and say, okay, now you need to know all you need to know. But we're going to kind of try to dig a little bit deeper into how those play out, each of those. So duty of care is the first one. It'll go, yeah. Which really just means board members should show up and participate. they should come prepared. They should, the staff should provide them with a board packet ahead of a board meeting so that they can, not the night before, but well ahead of time so that they can prepare for their meeting and show up and ask intelligent questions. So showing up, asking questions, reading the board packet is duty of care, is my colloquial language. So duty of loyalty is really just making sure that you put the interest, when you are at that board table, putting the interests of the organization above your own. So if there's any kind of conflict of interest, making sure you disclose those conflicts and not participating in decisions that might affect you personally. In Waco, well, I mean most places, but especially in Waco, conflicts abound everywhere. I mean, everybody knows each other, everybody's in business with each other. It's just a small enough community that happens. And so we have to disclose those. That's the most important, transparency. You'll hear me say a lot. But then also just stepping out of the decision if there's any way it might impact you positively or negatively. And also holding each other accountable for that. Hey, wait a minute, didn't you mention a conflict here? And not being offended that somebody maybe mentioned your conflict and you happen to forget about it. So the last one, according to law, is duty of obedience, and that's just making sure you're following all the laws, ensuring that your decisions and strategies actually have to do with the purpose of the organization. And my fonts are a little messed up, formatting. But making sure that you're just doing what you exist to do. And then I add a couple of things: duty of common sense and duty of curiosity, which really just flow it from the other three that are the legal duties. But really thinking, if something seems a little off to you at a board table, it probably is. And asking questions, and the way I love to ask a question about something I really don't understand is to say, can you help me understand? Because the way, phrasing it that way sort of implies you have some understanding of it, even if you have no clue what in the world's going on. So I am not inclined to just speak up all the time. I'm more introverted. People don't believe me, but that's true. And so saying it that way helps me soften it for myself. It helps me be a little more confident in speaking up in a group where I might not be as confident. But then it also if I think it's something is really crazy, I want to be like, what the heck? Why are we doing it this way? And so that's a way to soften my potential off-putting way of asking a question. So, but making sure you're asking the questions is the point, and however you need to ask them or soften the way you ask it is also important. So, in order to fulfill those duties that I just went over, a board member really needs to have a thorough understanding of the organization that they're governing. And so they need to think about the operations, really understand the operations and what the staff does, what happens every day, the community it serves, and then the larger ecosystem. There's a great article recently that came out in the Stanford Social Innovation Review about purpose-driven boards. And I love the article because it really puts into a frame of reference, not just thinking about what is the mission of our organization and how are we going to be the best of our organization, but how do we fit into the ecosystem of this community, and how do we interface with the other organizations and the grassroots and the people we serve, and really thinking of it bigger, and how are we all advancing making Waco a better place, not just our little thing. So an important piece of understanding all of that is understanding the life cycle of a nonprofit. So this, I think, is a great visual, and there are a couple of reasons I think this is important to think about. Is if you're thinking about joining a board, it's really important to know where that organization is on the life cycle, because the amount of work that's going to be required of you is different depending on where it is. So if it's an idea in startup, it's going to be a lot of work, and there's probably no staff yet. There might be an executive director who's the person who started the organization, and you are probably like their best friend who they got you to join their board because you're a really nice person and care about them. But that's going to be a lot of work as a board member. As you get into growth and maturity, that's going to be less work, but it's also just going to be different work. The kinds of things you need to be thinking about are different, and strategic planning is going to be different. An organization that begins to go into decline is a lot like a startup potentially, because first you got to figure out what are we going to do about the fact that we're in decline, and then you got to do a turnaround, which is a whole lot of work. I was actually affiliated with an organization that I'm still on the board of. It's not in Waco, but that I could tell was in decline. It's a membership organization, and the members were declining. And with a membership organization, if you're not growing, you're dying. And it was not only not growing, but it was losing members, and that scared me because it meant a lot to me as a member. I didn't want it to die. It provided a lot of professional development for me. So I actually sought out the board chair and said, I want to be on this board, which now seems crazy because it was a whole lot of work. We had to go through a leadership transition and all that goes along with that, and a full turnaround, whole new strategic plan, the whole works. And it was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding because now the organization is growing, and it's a really exciting place to be. But I fully knew what I was getting into. I don't really think I fully knew, but I had an idea that it was going to be a lot of work. But I did that with my eyes open. I did not get on and was like, oh my, what have I done? I fully knew. So it's important to know where you're whether if you're thinking about joining a board, know where they are, ask the kinds of questions that will help you understand this. But then also, if you're on a board right now, think about where you are and think about, okay, if we're actually in decline, is our board doing enough right now to address that? It may or may not be. So lots of questions come kind of with this chart. So and I'm sorry, I have to pause. We actually have handouts that are available on our website. Our printer broke at Cooper Foundation, and so our IT department, which is no one, could not fix that. So there's actually a sheet that you can find in there in the handouts that is a 10 responsibilities of a board member, which you can find on Board Source if you just Google 10. And we kind of threw those up into the air, and they land in these 3 buckets. So I do encourage you to go to our website and look at the board governance materials that we have there. So it has this presentation, and it actually has the longer one and a workbook that goes along with it. But so it's 3 big buckets of responsibilities: setting strategic direction, ensuring adequate resources, and providing fiduciary oversight. So the first one being setting strategic direction. This is really thinking deeply about where is this organization going? Is our mission appropriate? If it's a new organization, what's our mission? If it's not a new organization, is our mission appropriate? Is it fulfilling what we hope it is? And then what is our vision, mission, vision being a little bit different? And then, so what do we want the world to look like after we are successful? And our nonprofit can go away because we solved this problem. Wouldn't that be nice? And then what is that? Where is it we're going? And then what is the strategy to get there? And then the strategy, the implementation of the strategy, and I'm speaking for nonprofits with staff, the implementation of the strategy is done by your one employee, the executive director, and whoever they decide to hire to make that happen. So setting strategic direction, huge piece. Oh, and then thinking about, again, I'm going to keep going back to this, thinking about your organization as a part of an ecosystem. And I think this, again, is sort of new. If you saw this presentation like 3 years ago, that wasn't even part of what I talked about. I tweet this all the time. But I think that is so important, is to really think how we are connected to the other organizations with whom we partner, or even with whom we may share clients, but we never talk to them. Maybe we should talk to them. And think about how we all fit together. So thinking, again, how will our decisions impact everybody around us? It's not just about us. And how can we do the most good? How can we do the most good? Purpose-driven. So, and then ensuring adequate resources. So, I forgot to ask. I just gave you the answer. I always say, like, what's the first thing you think about when resources? And everybody says money, and that is true. Money is a really important resource to nonprofit organizations. But there are lots of other resources that are important that the board needs to be paying attention to. That is a picture of the board. A lot of people automatically think that's the staff. You only have one employee as the board, and that's the CEO or executive director. But so making sure that the board is strong and that you are constantly thinking about new board members. I'm going to get into the board building cycle in a few minutes, but you're always thinking about, we aren't always going to be here because you should have term limits. And so who can come after me? Who can come after that person? Who can come next? What do we need next? That's a very important resource that is the board's responsibility. And then the one employee that you have that represents standing behind and supporting the one employee you have that's the CEO or executive director. Thinking about the reputation of the organization and making sure you maintain it and don't talk badly about the organization, don't disclose things that you aren't supposed to disclose, paying attention to who's on the board so that you can maintain a good reputation. All that goes along with that is part of what the board ought to be paying attention to. And then advocating for the organization. I used to talk about this in terms of, if you rely on any kind of state funding or federal funding, you need to be advocating for your organization so that they continue to get funding. And that's like been opened wide even further to, are your clients affected by policies that are made at the local, state, and federal level? Are they affected in a bad or good way? And advocating for things that help your clients and advocate or going against or informing our elected officials about things that may adversely affect your clients and why that's so important. And that really helps when the board is doing that. Staff can do it too, especially with funding, but it's, staff sometimes are seen as, oh, well, this is important to you because you just want to keep your job. Where when it's board, I'm a volunteer board member, I don't get paid. So I just am doing this because I care and this is important to the world. So advocating on behalf of issues, clients, and your organization is important. So supporting the chief executive is really important, making sure you have a healthy relationship with that person and helping to support them in ways that, so when you hire someone new, I don't know about y'all, but I haven't found any perfect people. And so when you hire someone, they may not be perfect. So they may not actually have all the things you were looking for in an executive director. And so what is it you can do to help support that person to make sure that they're successful? They may need training, they may need coaching, they may need just one-on-one meetings with you as the board chair. Frequently, they probably will if you're hiring someone new, they are, no matter how experienced they are. But making sure that you're thinking about ways to support them and not just saying, okay, go do your job, good luck, and hope for the best. We're here to support that person and make sure that they are successful. And not, if you see problems with it, just say, well, I guess we have to get a new one. No, that's a lot of trouble. That sometimes might be the case, but probably it's that they need some sort of training or coaching or something. So, and I've said chief executive, CEO, executive director, whatever, that's all the same, and this is all for staffed organizations. So also thinking about how can you support them, make sure that they are evaluated annually, and that before that evaluation, they have a clue about what they're going to be evaluated on. So setting some measurable goals, maybe around service and impact, staff satisfaction, whatever else it may be relevant to the organization you're affiliated with. I think staff satisfaction and turnover are two really important things to pay attention to as a board member with a big staff, especially. If you have an executive director and then a lot of top level people who just seem to keep rotating, there's a revolving door, you have a leadership problem that needs to be addressed. And I've seen that happen with so many organizations where it's like, they can't seem to keep any of the top people. There just seem to be problems. So pay attention to that as an executive director. That doesn't apply to small organizations, but ones with layers, definitely. I've seen it. Last one is providing fiduciary oversight. So we want to make sure that we're approving an annual budget, that we have a clue of how much money we're going to spend for the year, and then reviewing the budget every month and the financial statements, not just the income statement and the balance sheet, but a budget comparison. Are we actually following our budget and paying attention to where we're supposed to be spending the money? Payroll taxes. We are tax exempt organizations, so we do not have to pay sales tax. but we do have to pay payroll taxes. And this is the thing that a lot of organizations, when they're in a cash crunch, decide to put off paying. And because you can't put off paying the electric bill because the lights will go off, or the water, or there's some more IT, you're gonna lose some stuff and you won't be able to work. But the payroll taxes feel like I could probably just delay this, nobody's gonna notice, and that's probably true for a little bit. But once the IRS is onto that, individual board members are liable for payroll taxes that are not paid. So the IRS can come after you individually, not the organization, if the organization is not paying payroll taxes. So come up with a system that you know that the payroll taxes are being paid, and not just relying on the word of someone. If you've been in this presentation before, you've heard this example, is that there was an organization that had applied to Cooper Foundation for a grant and had in their minutes that I was reading, had said, payroll taxes, yes, or something. It was very vague. I didn't even know what it meant, so I asked, and they said, oh, a few years ago, we weren't paying payroll taxes, and so we got in trouble for that. And so we built it into the minutes that we would ask the executive director every month and to make sure they were paid. And the person apparently would say yes, and so that's what payroll taxes, yes, is what meant. Well, fast forward a few months, we gave the grant, and then in the paper, they had in fact not been paying their payroll taxes, and that board had just been relying on this person's good work. And so make sure that you have a better system than that to make sure. In the Cooper Foundation, we have 2 staff, as I mentioned earlier, and I have nothing to do with writing checks. We'll get into our internal controls in a minute. I wouldn't even know how to make a payment to someone if someone needed money right now. I would just have to pay out of my pocket, and I can't do it because I also am the signer on the account. And so if I can't have too much control. And so we have everything divided very much. So we have Kelly, my colleague at the Cooper Foundation, pays all the bills, and she's in charge of making sure the payroll taxes are paid. I approve the payroll taxes every month. I then see a printout that the payroll taxes were actually paid. Those go into it, and I sign that every payroll. And then that goes into a folder that our treasurer reviews once a month to make sure that we're paying payroll. So encourage things like that, internal controls, but also keeping you individually from being liable for paying the organization's payroll taxes. Doing an annual review of the 990, this is actually a check box on the 990, so it's easy enough to check, and kind of raises red flags if it's not checked. So that's really easy to do. The 990 is the tax return for nonprofit organizations. Making sure you have directors and officers insurance, because as Chuck Loring says, anyone can sue you for anything. And so that will protect you. It doesn't help you on the payroll tax thing, but if you get sued, it'll help you. And then making sure that there is an annual audit of some degree. It may be, if you're a really small organization, audits are expensive. There are the local firms in Waco are beginning to offer some lower level, not a full-blown audit, that will help you kind of just get a better grasp of your financials and be able to present it to potentially funders in a way that might be satisfactory. But if there's an audit done, and when you get to a point where you need an audit, making sure it is done. And then again, having internal controls, having unscheduled reviews of staff expense reports, making sure all bank statements are sent to the board treasurer, and then encouraging whistleblowers. I tell Kelly, my one employee, if you ever think that I'm doing anything strange, or if you see something on our credit card that looks strange, please ask me, because I certainly didn't mean to steal anything or do anything wrong. So please ask me first, but if you are not comfortable, and I give this presentation all the time, and she's usually here, she couldn't be here today, but so she hears this very regularly. So creating a culture of whistleblowers by re-emphasizing frequently, if you see something strange, please bring it up with me, because I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. But if that is not comfortable for you, then please go to the board chair, please. So, and hopefully he will then bring it up with me. But a lot of the time, fraud, something looks like fraud, but it's actually just some sloppiness. And we don't want innocent people accused of fraud. So asking questions and creating a culture of transparency and asking questions is really important. So that's small, and I always say if you have to apologize for the font, it shouldn't be a slide. But keeping in mind that 501c3 is a tax status, not a business model. As I mentioned in the beginning, it doesn't mean we want zero money at the end of the year. We want to be growing as an organization and having some reserves so that if we do need a leadership transition, we can maybe hire a search firm or hire someone to help us out. Or if we want to grow, we want to be able to maybe get a new building or make improvements to our building. But just like you might have a savings account for your vacation or for your child's education, we want to have buckets of money in a nonprofit for various things that may come in the future. And then also thinking about the fact that overhead is really important and has its place. Don't make your staff like have crummy chairs and horrible computers. And we are professionals, and many of us went to college and graduate school, and we want to be treated like professionals and paid like professionals and work in environments that are professional environments. So keep that in mind as well. So kind of thinking about all these things that we just talked about, avoiding groupthink. So back to the beginning, asking questions. Can you help me understand? Ask hard questions. And then that last one that says point and counterpoint. And healthy arguments are a good thing on a board. And it takes a lot to get to a healthy argument, but it is really important to help motivate and keep the organization healthy by asking those hard questions. And the good way to do that, this is my reminder slide, is to host events where you can socialize. Don't just keep the board interaction limited to sitting around a board table where you are having those hard discussions and conversations. Try to create ways where maybe you have dinner once a quarter or however often that feels right to you, so that people can get to know each other on a personal level and remember when you're sitting around that table, oh, that's a human being. Maybe you should be kinder and not say, why the heck do you do it? Can you help me understand? So building in ways that you can get to know each other and build relationships that are not just around the hard questions and have fun together is so important to healthy boards. So next thing is building a great board. Can you remind me what time I'm supposed to stop? 45? 45. Okay. So who builds the board? Does anybody know who builds the board? I gave you the answer earlier. The board. I hear like someone barking back there. Board. Yes, the board builds the board with the governance committee, which is the board, and which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute, what the governance committee, which used to be the nominating committee. The trend these days is that the nominating function has grown a little bit to the governance committee, which includes nominating function, and then also just kind of making sure you have a healthy board, which obviously nominating is a huge piece of that. So in conjunction with the nominating committee, governance committee, we're all going to be constantly thinking about potential successors on the board. So who might follow me, or who might follow Ilda, or who might follow Pat. Like, not I'm looking for another Pat, but who might we need once that person rolls off the board? What kind of skills might we need? And then funneling those names to a governance committee who's collecting the names and maybe having some casual conversations with those people. At some point, we're going to need a new board member. Might you be interested in potentially future sitting, like never committing, never inviting until you're really ready, but kind of having those soft conversations. So when do we work on building the board? I've also given this answer. All the time, all year long, yes. So not just when we know that Ilda and Pat are rolling off the board, but right now we know that we're going to be losing a couple of people in 6 to 9 months. So we should really be, and we also know that we're going to be losing more people in 18 months. And we know more people are going to be rolling off the next year. So it's not like we can't be thinking way far ahead, because we know we have term limits and they're all staggered and people are going to be rolling off all the time. So thinking about who we're losing and what skills, expertise, demographics, whatever it is we need as those things happen. and building a list. So as I've kind of said, we want to think about what do we need right now when these people are going to be rolling off in the next year. What's going on right now that's important to our organization, and what are the most important things that we're looking for? Not people, but what traits are we going to need to advance as an organization? And then, do we have the right people right now on the board? What are we missing? And there's a great board matrix chart that you can develop. There's on the example that we have on our website, it has like a ton of different skills that are probably not appropriate for your organization. So think about what's important to your organization, come up with a matrix, do a little survey of what you have right now. As you interview new people, ask them to tell you what their skills are, so you can then put them in and say, oh, look, this person has this, and we know we're losing this, so maybe that's going to be the right person, or maybe it's not, but maybe it is. But you at least know it. So start with, what do we have right now, so that you can be looking at what you need. Thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is, everybody's talking about making sure we diversify boards, and everyone's like, how do we do that? So the importance of it, I mean, can't be understated. Or overstated, you know. It's really important. We want to make sure, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it actually does improve the way boards function when you have diverse boards. Of every kind of diversity that we're talking about, because of the different perspectives that we each bring. So we want to make sure that our boards are populated with people who are actually authorized by the community. That we aren't just like, I'm not just finding all my friends in my little circle to serve on my board, because that might not represent the actual community that we're trying to serve. And so, are we doing all we can to listen to what our stakeholders need? And are those voices actually coming through at the board table? And so, instead of asking, what do we think is best, really thinking about, what does the community think is best? And the only way we can know what the community thinks is best is to make sure that we have the whole community represented on our board, and in every sense of the word, diverse. So, but in order to become a diverse board, we also have to think about potentially making changes to the way we've always done things. I was invited to be on a board a few years ago. It was like, we meet at 10:30 on Thursday, on the third Thursday of the month. And I was like, I can't come at 10:30 on the third Thursday. Like, I have a job. And they were like, well, that's too bad, So they ended up changing it, and it's now at lunchtime. But I would then go another little bit further. Okay, so what if I were somebody who maybe worked, who didn't have such a flexible job? I mean, I could have gone at 10:30, but I was just like, that's ridiculous. If I didn't have such a flexible job and I only had an hour for lunch, and the meetings are 11:30 to 1, so I'm going to get there at the fastest. If it was like just down the street, I'm going to be probably 10 minutes late. So I'm going to get there at 12:10, which would be 40 minutes late to the meeting. And then I'm going to have to leave at 12:50 in order to get back to my job at 1 o'clock, so I don't lose my job. And you know what everyone's going to say about me? She shows up 40 minutes late to our meetings. And she leaves 10 minutes early. Like, how much commitment does she have? Well, how much commitment did I actually have? I am getting there as fast as I can and staying as long as I can so that I can be at that work. So thinking about maybe doing things the way we've always done it is not the best. And it's not the way to be the most inclusive. So that's just one little way that would be an important thing to revisit, maybe every year. Poll everybody, when's the best time, and know that. And also also ask, how flexible actually are you? Because somebody might say, well, this is my best time, but really I can actually make anything work because I have a super flexible job. Just really thinking a little bit differently about the way we approach things. Oh, also thinking about the way we have boardroom deliberations. We want to, I talk a little bit later about using Robert's Rules of Order, and I think Robert's Rules are a really important way to govern a meeting and kind of set a tone that this is important, this is a meeting, this is not social time. but Robert's rules can also be used for evil if you want to. So thinking about Robert's rules, that they are meant for the good. They're meant to actually protect the voice of the minority, so make sure they're being used that way. But also coming up with ways that don't feel very Robert's rulesy, but to say, okay, what we're going to do now is do a little parent share, and here's the topic we want to actually discuss as a board. And so we're going to sit next to, pair with the person next to you, have the conversation about whatever the topic is, and then everybody reports back. Everybody reports back, so that everybody's voice is heard, and that helps protect the voice of the minority, the people who may not be as comfortable, may not have ever been on a board before. That helps them. They just have to talk to one person about the topic. It also helps those of us who are introverts, who are like sitting there thinking, I really want to say this, but I don't want to look like an idiot, or whatever it is. I can say it to this person and kind of practice, and then say it to the whole group. And that can actually, you can have really fruitful discussions that everybody's voice is heard. And that's a totally different kind of thing in board meetings that I think people are not really used to. So this is sort of what used to be my slide about how to find new board members. And this is a good start, it's fine. I used to always also say start with donors, and I think that is a good place to start, because if you have a donor who's already giving money, they might actually want to give you some time, but all board members, all donors might not be good board members. So they might just be great donors and really great at writing a check and really be awful at showing up to your board table. Or they may be annoying when they get, who knows. So be careful about that. But I used to just kind of say this and move on. When really thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you really can't just stick with these, because these generally tend to be in your own little circles. And what good does that do until we are really a fully integrated society, which we're far from? We need to go beyond our regular networks. So that is, it takes time. We want to really think about deep networking in places we don't normally go. So go places, and this is really mostly for the white people in the room, go places where you're the only white person in the room, and it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but you will get to know new people. And I'm not saying you should go into a room you've never met anybody and ask them to be on your board, but that's the way you begin to develop relationships so that you can then get to the point where you actually find someone who fulfills all those things you identified earlier in the skills, expertise, wisdom, age, whatever, all the things you're looking for. Oh, you know what? I happen to have met somebody and developed a friendship with them, and maybe they would be good on my board. Not that way we can avoid the box checking tokenism and have true relationships with people who then serve on our boards. So thinking about just sort of the board building cycle, we want to identify not people, but what we need. Think about cultivating them as potential board members, recruiting them. Do I have this? No, I don't. Orienting them to the board. So that they kind of know, oh, this is actually what it's like to be on this board. Have a smaller orientation where it's maybe the top staff, the leadership staff at the organization, and then a few key board members, maybe the people who are executive officers on the board, and kind of go through the financials, help them understand what exactly we do here, and here's how to read the financials, and let them ask questions in a smaller format, meeting, so that when they're at their first meeting, they already kind of have a grounding. They may not feel comfortable yet asking questions, but that will help kind of get a little bit further. And then continuing to engage and educate them, and then rotate them off the board. Have term limits so that you don't have people serving forever and ever and ever. And then evaluate their experience and evaluate your experience with them. If they were a crummy board member, write it down somewhere so that 5 years later, when you're not there anymore as the governance chair, they don't just bring that person back on because they don't know any better. That's rare, but So also thinking about, the people you're thinking about to join your board, are they really willing to do what it takes to serve on the board? You kind of are hearing what that means, because sometimes it just makes more sense for them to just be a volunteer at the organization, or just be a donor, like I said. Or it may be that, in fact, the kind of interest they're showing is maybe they should apply for a job here. They would be a phenomenal development director or whatever you're looking for. So think about that because everyone is important. Board members are not the most important people in the organization. Everybody is important to a nonprofit's health and success. So thinking about trends in board structure, a lot of organizations are tending to have standing committees that are governance, finance, and audit, and an executive committee. Although I have a lot to say about executive committee, which is why there are 3 asterisks. And then having ad hoc committees where, you may, oh gosh, we didn't realize we need to have this committee. So we're going to add it now, but we're not going to have it in our bylaws, because if it's in our bylaws, then we always have to have it. And if we're not always meeting as a committee in that particular committee, then we could be called out for being out of compliance with our bylaws, and all decisions made during that time period are moot. It's unlikely that's ever going to happen, but just stay within your bylaws and you don't have to worry about it. And so therefore, keep your bylaws simple and committees limited to just a few, so that you don't get tripped up by your bylaws. And that kind of speaks to the whole bylaws piece. And I love the idea of having a fundraising committee that consists, or all committees, I think this is a great idea, but it's especially good for a fundraising committee, is to have a committee that has some board members on it, but also you bring in other people who care about your organization, maybe some of those donors who you don't really want on your board, but wow, are they good fundraisers? So put them on a fundraising committee and put them to work. It's also a great way to test people out as potential board members in the future. They never showed up to any committee meetings. Why do we think they would show up to a board meeting? So paying attention to those kinds of things. And then you can have task forces for all the other stuff. Bylaws review, you don't need to have an ongoing committee to be looking at the bylaws. You really just need to occasionally make sure you review your bylaws and make sure they're working for you. And then when they've done that, poof, the committee, that task force goes away. And those are some other examples. I have to start talking fast now. So executive committee, I used to say, no executive committees, they're horrible. And I have tempered that because I've gotten so much pushback. And actually, that's not why. I believe that executive committees do have their place. I think a lot of the times executive directors want a small group of people to bounce things off of. I think that's really healthy when it's done that way. But the problem with executive committees is that they often end up becoming the actual decision-making group for the organization, and which makes the rest of the board a rubber stamp board. And so some questions just to be thinking about. Are committee members essentially attending 2 board members, or executive committee members? So they have a meeting the week before the board meeting, and then they talk about everything the board's supposed to talk about the next week. And then by the time it gets to the board, they've already decided where they feel, and they're basically presenting solutions and decisions to the rest of the board. Is the executive committee actually making all of the decisions? So that's what that is. Is there information the executive committee has that the rest of the board is not privy to? That's scary because everybody has the same fiduciary responsibility, but I don't necessarily have the same information that the full executive committee has. That scares me as a non-executive committee board member. So again, just paying attention, I do think that executive committees have a really important role when used with caution. And then is the executive committee actually doing other committees' work? Someone has said, well, but the executive committee is talking about who should be on the board next. And I'm like, isn't that governance and nominating? But the executive committee is going over all the financials every month. Isn't that the finance committee? So it's kind of like, what exactly are they spending time on? It might actually be the work of other committees. So if you have one, transparency is key. Have a limited role for that board, for that executive committee to fulfill. Make sure it's outlined everywhere. Make sure it's outlined who can be on the executive committee. That's not just at the whim of the other committee members. So paying attention to those things. Having 2 3-year terms, I'm talking about board terms, or 3 2-year terms, whatever. About 6 years is about all anybody wants to really be on a board. And so that is just sort of reasonable. And it's nice to tell people that as you're recruiting them. It's like, this is not a lifetime commitment. It's just, it starts with 3 years, and if you feel good about it, you can continue another 3 years, and if we feel good about you. Thinking about, I had said this earlier, using non-board members on committees, I think that's a really cool way to involve more people, help have more perspectives. Being very careful, this gets into, what your committee descriptions say the committees can do, so that you don't give a group of rogue people like all the power. Like there's some fences around what they can do. Making sure committee members committee meetings are open to all members. They're not secret meetings. It's a board committee, so everyone should be able to go. And then I think it's great to have committee minutes that is available to anybody if they want to read them. And of course, you want a good record of the meeting. But then not make every board member read all the committee minutes of all the committees, because nobody does. Let's face it. And we want everyone to show up with their duty of care, saying, I've read the board packet, and be honest about it. But if you really are asking people to read pages and pages and pages of other committee minutes, it's just tedious. So not that it shouldn't be available to them, but a great way to solve that is to create a board report that's like, here's what we're working on, here's what we need from the board if there's a decision, and here's what's going to happen in the next few months. And that's really all the other committee members, or all the other board members need to know about a particular committee. And that shortens the board packet and helps to ensure people actually read the whole thing. And it's not so long. Governance committee is taking the lead on nominating and recruitment, really thinking about board development, making sure, hey, has everybody been to some kind of board governance training? It's free. And Felicia offers it all the time, or you can get it anywhere. This isn't the only one, and this isn't the best, but it's here and it's free. So, making sure that you're doing sort of a board evaluation annually, like how are we doing? We just did this with the board I'm on, and oh my gosh, the information we got from it was so rich. People spent so much time on it. They had so much to say. It was all open to new questions. It was a little bit exhausting to be on the governance committee and read through it and sift through it, but wow. We got so much good information. If you want a sample of that, I would be happy to share. And then making sure that, the bylaws, you have the policies you need and the bylaws are easy and working for you. So this is just a quick little, that says 10 minutes left, let's do the strategy. So a lot of the times boards you end up in meetings where you're just like sitting and getting a whole lot of information from the staff, and then you have no time for real conversation among board members. And so thinking about the way you structure your agenda so that you actually have time for deep conversations, I think is really important. So, you're going to have a consent agenda is when you put a whole bunch of stuff in one section, you just approve it all at once. So you'd have maybe committee reports and minutes. I don't think you should have financials on that, because I don't know if a nonprofit that's just so healthy that you shouldn't all be looking at financials monthly. So I take that out as its own section, because I think that's an important strategic conversation to be having. Although some consent agendas have financials. Again, this is not cookie cutter, whatever works for you. But really having whoever your treasurer is or whoever is presenting the financials help make them understandable to everybody. What are the key takeaways? We don't have to spend hours and hours looking at the financials line by line, but what are the key takeaways? What's important about this? And then you get to committee work only if the committee needs something. There's no reason to have a committee report if the committee doesn't actually need something from the board at that moment. So thinking about strategically, what do we need to talk about? Maybe have a mission moment where you get to really remember why you're there. And then have, what are the questions we need to be talking about? What's important? Oh, and then having an executive session. I'm a big advocate for executive sessions, always on the agenda, so that when you actually have a problem that you need to talk about, it's not a big punch in the gut to your poor executive director who you're like, we're going to have an executive session now, you have to leave the room. So an executive session is a part of the meeting where you just have the board discuss, a lot of things. One thing would be that maybe the performance of the executive director. If you're having a problem, that's a good time. If they're doing a great job, you might want to say, hey, let's have a surprise gift for them. You can't do that if you don't have an executive session. And otherwise you're having emails and who wants more emails. And so just have an executive session to talk about how great your CEO is and how you can give him a big fat raise. And then, but you also want to be talking about hey, how are we doing as a board? That's kind of an uncomfortable thing to do in front of your one employee. So let's talk about that board evaluation when we got all that great information. that executive director will give them the information they need from that. They don't need the nitty-gritty of our issues with each other. So I've already talked about Robert's Rules, and I think dashboards are a great way to help people understand financials, like who doesn't understand red, yellow, green. You can do that with all kinds of things. If you're a membership organization, you can have all the membership data in a dashboard so that you're paying attention to that. And then, as I've mentioned, doing board evaluations, and that is the end, with 0 minutes to spare. One. Wow. 1 minute. So, if you have questions, since there's only 1 minute, well, if you have any questions, I'm available. You can go cooperfdn.org and find me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I am going to have to leave like 5 minutes after 1 o'clock today because I have a 1:15 meeting, but happy to hear from any of you, and thank you so much for your attention. I so appreciate y'all, seemed like you cared and were listening, so I appreciate it so much. Thank you very much, and thanks to those of you who are currently serving on boards and to those of you who are thinking about it.
Yes, let's give Felicia another round of applause. I will tell you that when I was putting our slideshow together, which we do that, we run it, while everyone's coming in and networking, I was looking for pictures of what can I put on the slideshow? And so I will say that today, 4 years ago today, was our first HLN monthly luncheon. So it's actually our anniversary, and we've done so much since then. We are a committee under the Hispanic Leaders, we're a committee under the Syntax Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And I just came on that board in October, and they have had the training from you, and I felt comfortable serving on that board because I knew that they had that training. And I think that's important too, is when you decide to serve on a board, you want to make sure that the board chair and the members are trained. And we will definitely ask Felicia to come back again to make sure that we are developing leaders in our community. We really appreciate you for all of the hard work that you do, not just giving this presentation to the Hispanic Leaders Network, but also to other entities in the community and people who have a desire to serve and give back to the community in the form of being on a board. So thank you again. I also would like to thank our sponsor for today, Waco Foundation. Amazing. It's amazing to see Cooper Foundation and Waco Foundation always teaming up and working on initiatives in the community that make a big impact. And Waco Foundation has been very supportive for the Hispanic Leaders Network and for the Syntax Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And thank you again, Natalie, Marlena. Thank y'all for all the work you do in the community as well. And Ashley. Ashley couldn't be here, but Ashley is the executive director of the Waco Foundation. So thank you so much for that. So just a few announcements. On Thursday, June 9th, the Hispanic Leaders Network Advisory Committee will be holding its annual summer retreat from 9 to 1. So if you're interested in serving on HLN's advisory committee, please see me at the end of the meeting. Just like Felicia was saying, sometimes you want to know what you're getting into when you serve on a committee or a board. And so we are definitely a working committee. Couldn't do all what we do without the people on the advisory committee that are always rolling up their sleeve, wanting to make sure that we have well-planned events, great events, and to just make sure that everything runs smoothly and that we're tying everything we do to our vision and our mission. And our vision is to develop and empower current and future leaders and make a difference in the Greater Waco community. We are inclusive at the Hispanic Leaders Network, and we appreciate everyone participating. So if you have interest in serving on the advisory committee, please come see me. I can tell you a little bit about the roles and responsibilities of serving on that committee. And again, we will have our summer retreat next Thursday here in this room from 9 to 1. Also, we are not going to have an event in July. We are going to take that month to continue planning for the 2022-2023 year for the Hispanic Leaders Network. But we will have our next event in August. So please be on the lookout for that. Social media, our website, the chamber will get it out. Sometimes we put it out, in the paper. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that. Now at this moment in time, I didn't have anyone fill out a card, but if you would like to stand up to make an announcement, whether it's a celebration, that would be maybe somebody who just got a job or a promotion or just something great happening, or if you know of an event that you want the community to know about, now is the time to stand up and let us know that information. Anyone? Okay. Well, without that being said, I hope you all have a great Friday. Have a great summer. We'll see you back in August. And take care. Have a blessed weekend as well. Thank y'all.